Welcome to Optily Radio, your regular 30-minute dose of everything you need to accelerate your e-commerce marketing success.
Welcome back to another episode of Optily Radio. I'm your host, Nina White. Today's episode is going to be about something we haven't really talked too much about on this show yet, and that's customer research. While you're probably familiar with developing a standard user persona to stand in for one of your typical customers, today we're going to delve into a different kind of approach to your more traditional market research. We're going to talk to someone who's working for a new company, which is pioneering mind typing and using cognitive analytics to get at the type of messaging that resonates best with different types of people. So let's jump right into this fascinating discussion on the science of mind types. Today's guest is Charles Chy. Charles is the CEO of MindCart AI, a consumer insights platform built for B2C marketers who crave a deep fundamental understanding of their customers. He's also an advisor for Chef Inc., a smart cooking platform that provides guided recipes powered by AI, and is also an advisor for Soltech Solutions, an e-commerce company that specializes in plant lights for interior design. And if you've joined us for previous episodes, you'll remember Kevin Stagg. Kevin is our marketing and customer director here at Optily. He's got nearly 20 years of experience working with B2C and B2B brands, big and small, including international companies like Microsoft and Ding. So welcome to the show, Charles and Kevin.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to be here. How are you, Charles?
Good. Always a pleasure to join the Optily crew.
Awesome. So you're usually based on the East Coast, right? But you tell us that you're joining us from warmer climes these days.
Yeah, so I transplanted down to Mexico during sort of the peak of the pandemic in the U.S. So around November, I hopped on a plane. I wanted to avoid the winter, the election, the sort of spiking corona cases. I've been here for about 8 months now. I'm in Playa del Carmen, which is in between, it's like an hour south of Cancun and an hour north of Tulum. So right on the beach here.
Awesome. It's a beautiful area. I visited, probably around 10 years ago with my mom once for spring break. It's a really nice area to be in. The food is just awesome.
It is. And it's always warm. It's always sunny. It's doing wonders for my seasonal depression. So.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how it is you got into the world of e-commerce, and what caused you to come about starting MindCart AI?
Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur my entire career. I would say even before my formal career started, I was doing things that were entrepreneurial. I won't get into the specifics of it, but most notably, I used to run a digital marketing agency for about 4 years. We grew that business to over $1 million annual recurring revenue. We had 50 clients, 15 employees, one office, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I ended up getting out of that business at the end of 2019. My former partner still operate that business today. And ultimately, I wanted to make a shift more towards technology. We're taking this agency services model, trying to productize it. And I think at the end of that journey, what we realized is it's very difficult to productize a services business. So I sort of went on my own. So starting 2020, I joined an insurtech as their first full-time employee, helping them go to market, find product market fit. Eventually, they raised $7 million in seed financing. And all the while I had been a part of this insurtech, I met this guy named Howard Moskowitz. And it turns out that Howard Moskowitz is the world's greatest and most famous market researcher. Malcolm Gladwell did a TED Talk on him. In his career, he's worked with literally half of the Fortune 500. He's behind products like the electric toothbrush, the cashback credit card, chunky pasta sauce, Dunkin' Donuts coffee, Nescafe, Spam, orange juice with pulp. Really, the list just goes on and on and on. And, most famous entrepreneurs and business people, they have one hit. Like Phil Knight had Nike, and that's a big hit. Howard in his career has had dozens of hits. And I think the only explanation for that is not that Howard is a genius at looking into the minds of other human beings through like intuition and experience, but that he developed a repeatable method for being able to get into the minds of others. And so he started showing me that, basically taking me under his wing, like pulling back the curtain, showing me his research methodology, his data. And I found it so fascinating. Like, it just was the convergence of all of my life experiences up until that point, in entrepreneurship, in marketing, in digital marketing, even my background in philosophy, which I studied for around 10 years. And the thing that got me was like, here's this incredible proven method to understand the minds of other human beings, and it's sort of sitting on the shelf. So Howard has had this amazing career. He's utilized it in like hundreds of consulting engagements. But if we looked at the number of practitioners around the world that were actually utilizing this research methodology today, I could have counted that on two hands last year. And so when he asked me to come help bring that research methodology to the world, I really jumped at the opportunity. And that's how I got here today. And we basically got off the ground with MindCart AI.
Awesome. That's really fascinating stuff. So I just want to maybe take a step back and zoom out to sort of the general field that this falls into, which I believe is cognitive analytics. So if you could just maybe take a minute to sort of explain what that is and how it's related to marketing specifically.
Yeah. So I would say this is like a cognitive economics approach. It's a cognitive economics approach. So when it comes to understanding how people think, you can go top down or you can go bottom up, right? Two typical methods. So marketing psychology, marketing fundamentals, psychology in general, this is top down. So like in psychology, we form a theory about how humans think, and then we apply that theory to specific instances. So we would say like a psychologist looking at a husband and a wife arguing might say the husband experienced some sort of childhood trauma that is manifesting itself in avoidant attachment disorder. And that explains this instance of conflict. It's like standard psychological theory. Or like in terms of marketing psychology, we might say like people read the screen left to right. Or when you have this button color next to this button color, like the contrast, draws your eye to like this side of the screen instead. So we have an idea about like how the mind should work, and then we try to apply that to our specific business. And in contrast to that, you have like the behavioral economics approach. And in behavioral economics, I'm not an expert at this, but there's that book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. He gives a really good example about loss aversion. And so traditional theories of rationality and like in economic theory say that humans are rational actors and they would always act to maximize like their own ends in a way that you would perceive to be rational. When we actually look at human behavior, we're doing irrational things all the time. So the example he gives is like, if you give someone the option of winning $1,000 at a 50% chance, or a 100% chance to win $500, they're going to take the sure win. They're going to, opt for $500 100% of the time. Whereas if you flip the incentive and you give them the option of losing $1,000 50% of the time, or losing $500 100% of the time, the incentive is flipped once again. So like when it comes to winning, you want the absolute. When it comes to losing, you want the like the probabilistic scenario. And so what they're doing is studying how humans behave within the context of a laboratory, experimental design. And they're trying to understand like from a bottom up standpoint, like what drives human behavior in these discrete increments. So I would say we do the same thing, but instead of behavior, we're trying to quantify the dimensions of the human mind, still within a lab setting.
And when you speak about this to, prospective clients or colleagues, peers in the industry, how do they respond? Do they respond rationally, irrationally? Do they look back at their careers and say, "Oh, wow, this is something that I've been doing wrong," or "No, this is the wrong approach because I've been doing it right"? What's the kind of typical response when you explain the background to Mindcart and obviously the proposition you have now?
Yeah, marketers definitely get it. It's sometimes they're not in a position where they're ready to like utilize these insights because at the end of the day, like it's one thing to conduct research and generate an insight. It's another thing to like be able to utilize that insight, um, integrate that insight into your marketing implementation. There are politics at play, there are budgetary constraints. But in terms of like the overall, like like I would say our thesis in the market, I think that is being very well received because like take the process that companies go through to launch a new brand. So let's say you're working at a marketing agency and you brought out a new client. What does that process look like of bringing that client to market with their new product or service? Well, you'd conduct some stakeholder interviews. You do some customer interviews, maybe you do some, keyword analysis, maybe you do some competitive analysis. You do that Gartner Magic Quadrant thing, you map out your competitive white space, and then you go through this exercise. You create your personas, your value props, differentiators. Then you come up with this really nice looking slide deck. And it's beautifully graphic designed, And, I think the little known secret about that is whatever ends up in this deck is just some person's best guess at what an effective go-to-market is going to be. And the good marketers are doing some level of research, right? And the best marketers, they're taking it to the next level. So maybe they're even validating components of that strategy along the way. They're running some like discrete A/B tests and stuff like that. So, but at the end of the day, whatever ends up in that deck is just some person guessing. And then we start going to market. We start building it. We build out the funnel. We pay for influencers. We build out our website, landing pages, our ad campaigns, email campaigns, social media profiles. And 99% of the time we get it wrong. And so there's like 1% that graphic design slide deck, they hit it right on the money. 99%, our expectation is that we're going to get to the market and be wrong. And then from there, what do? It's a process of iterating using field experimentation like A/B testing in order to figure out what the right mix of people, concepts, and messages are in order to build an effective, like scalable business or funnel. And that's the reality of what it's like to launch a company in 2021. I don't think anyone would argue with that.
You've just described my career in a succinct sentence. It's fantastic. I love it. It's brilliant to hear it actually played back because of obviously the potential benefits of what we're talking about today in terms of MindCart.
And the smart people figure it out, but that's 5% of people, 5% of companies. 95% of companies that launch new products and services, they fail. They never figure out what that correct mix is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So let's get to the meat of this whole conversation and tell us what exactly a mind type is and what is your process to create one.
I'd say the best way to put this is when we talk about testing and validation today in marketing and market research, we're really talking about significant difference. So at what threshold of confidence can I prove that A is different than B? We approach the question of research through an inductive lens as opposed to a deductive lens. Now, it sounds maybe confusing. So the basic idea is instead of looking at statistical significance in terms of significant difference, we look at statistical significance in terms of non-zero difference. So we administer a test, and that test is, deconstructing your product or service into stimuli, and then presenting those stimuli to a panel of consumers. And then we observe their reaction. We're not asking them questions. We're presenting them with ideas or stimuli related to your product, service, or brand. And then we try to get how they feel. We get a reaction. And then when we talk about statistical significance, we're trying to say which of these reactions are consistently statistically significant, like consistently positive in a way. So what is a pattern that I can observe that helps me solve a problem? So every time I run a study, I observe a pattern in how consumers perceive stimuli related to my brand. And that gives me some reason to believe that I'm observing a real effect that will help me solve a problem. And if I continue to run studies and I continue to observe these patterns, then my confidence that I'm observing a real effect should increase. And that's the difference, is that we're not running experiments that isolate cause and effect. We're running experiments that basically give us information that we might find useful. And in that way, I can learn things about my users in an exploratory way that wouldn't be possible within the context of an A/B experiment. And, that's how Howard was able to apply this research to things like increasing colonoscopy screenings, reducing hospital readmission rates, getting more people to donate to the American Red Cross and television simulcasts and things like that. The idea of a mind type is really just a product-specific pattern that we can observe using our research methodology.
And I was going to ask just there, because you've spoken about a whole range of different types of products or different occurrences, anything from a medical procedure to a consumer product. Is there really anything that the kind of mind type analysis can't work on? It sounds like it's really quite universal in its kind of core methodology.
Yeah, at the heart of any societal or commercial issue is just how people think. It's just how people think. And, at least in terms of what we think is important, right? Because what's important is really just whatever value humans are conferring onto it. So, Howard is, historically used this in like healthcare, nonprofit. He's worked with the World Health Organization, the UN. He's used this research methodology to win jury trials where they're literally mind typing juries.
Wow.
Yeah. No, what we are doing is taking sort of like, we're trying to scale this, but like really commercialize and scale the business. And so we're hyper focused on the B2C digital marketing use case. That's it. Historically, this was used more for like product innovation, product development. So it's like, if you could know that there's a segment of the population that wanted hard seltzer before hard seltzer was a thing, you'd be a millionaire, right? Maybe a billionaire. If you knew that people wanted cinnamon whiskey before Fireball was a thing, you'd also be a billionaire. And that's historically what the research methodology was used for. But we wanted to break from the mold of just being another market research consumer insights company, because at the end of the day, it takes a very long time to go from insight to outcome when you're talking about product development. It could take 3, 4, 5 years before you figure out whether or not that insight paid off. And what we found is that oftentimes the role market research plays in this equation is just for validation. So it's like you have an executive or you have an entrepreneur that has an idea about a concept that they think is going to work. And instead of exploration, what they're looking for is validation. And for us, we thought the fact that we take an inductive approach, which is based more on exploration rather than validation, right? Observing a pattern as opposed to proving that A is better than B, might be better suited for the digital marketing use case. And on top of that, in digital marketing, we can go from insight to outcome in like two weeks. We generate the insight, we implement an A/B test. Did the insight perform or not? And so we can dramatically speed up this cycle. There are a lot of other reasons too, but I think if we get more into like the meat of the conversation, which is more about like marketing strategy and personas, I'll be able to speak on that a little bit more clearly.
And I think that's the really interesting part, is because you're focusing on what people are thinking, which is really quite universal and can be applied to anything. As you say, I can run some A/B tests. I can see this button works better than that button and change that literally overnight. The impact of that, though, is probably significantly less than understanding what somebody thinks and saying, well, there's a raft of changes I need to make as a result of understanding that thought process and how that's come about. And I can see how that's incredibly universal and starting at that level, as opposed to the what somebody thinks of the color of this button, is very restrictive, and instantly, just by adding that one sentence to the end of what somebody thinks, instantly reduces the value of that research, I guess, is where mind type analysis is really a major differentiator.
Marketers today, I think, are so tactically focused as opposed to strategically focused, which I think is a big shift from how marketing used to be conducted, where it was used to maybe be all strategy. Like when you think about big media buying campaigns and Mad Men, right? I'm not saying that was better or worse, but it's certainly different. The problem with being tactically focused is that you're very inefficient. And so when you're A/B testing, you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. And when you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, there's a lack of control. There's a lack of rhyme or reason for, why tests are being run, what you're testing. And it can be very hard to sort of engineer what the right outcomes are when you approach testing in that way. But if you go into your A/B testing, where you go to market, and you have a very deep fundamental understanding of your customer that is not just hypothetical, but is based on like real feedback from real consumers using quantitative methodology, it's a different feeling. You feel you have a much stronger foundation in what you think is right about your customer. And when you get evidence to the contrary and things aren't working, you're less likely to pull back from your intended plan, because you have that validation to begin with. And oftentimes, I think we're on the precipice of just getting it right in so many of our marketing campaigns, but we don't give it enough time. We're onto something that's correct, but we don't see the results immediately, and then we think we're doing the wrong thing. And that's much less likely to happen if you really, really understand your customer, what they care about, and how to communicate to them. And, up until this point, I don't think there really was a way of, saying you've arrived at the right answer to those questions until you've gotten to a point where you've already achieved product market fit. It was always a backwards looking thing. It's like, now my business is scaling, my ad ROAS is 8x, 10x, and I'm looking back in the window, I'm like, I think we got it. I think we got the right mix. And so if we could have that same confidence from a forward-looking perspective, I think, businesses just have a much easier time of being able to innovate and bring products to market more confidently.
So it's like this kind of early analysis really breeds a little bit of patience. Having that confidence ahead of time, ahead of getting to market, breeds a little bit of patience. And I think the thing that is maybe driving the opposite to that is we're all obsessed with our marketing dashboards. We all spend a lot of time as digital marketers in our marketing dashboards. We see whatever results are in front of us, and sometimes, like you say, they haven't had enough time. So you react to what's in front of you because that's the data in front of you, as opposed to having that early data that would actually probably make us all a little bit more patient as marketeers and not react to the dashboard and actually say, well, it's trending in the right direction, or it can still trend in the right direction. Any marketeer that has been faced with that problem, a senior person in the business looking at the numbers, looking at the dashboard, saying we need to make a change because look at the dashboard. it doesn't necessarily have, say, the mind type analysis or other kind of early analysis to say this is why we should be patient, and that arms them with something really, really quite powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been there personally, so I can speak from experience, which is like my campaign in June was doing really good, and then it's July, and then all of a sudden ROAS drops from like 10x to 6x. I'm like, oh, what did I do? The same campaign that was working last month, all of a sudden is plummeting this month. And it makes me question my sanity. It makes me question my, like what I've been doing. And in reality, it could just be like seasonal impact. It could be anything. And if you have confidence in your core strategy and you're not as reliant on the tactics of how you like engineer the funnel, you can deal with these scenarios which happen all the time in a much more like consistent, even keel, predictable way. And I think this is like even more important now today in 2021, because I know every marketer, well, I think like most marketers this year were thrown for a loop. Like we had this huge, especially if you're in D2C, because we had this huge spike in e-commerce as in 2020 due to the pandemic and just the change of how people are behaving and shopping online. Massive growth. And then a little bit of that being pulled back going into mid to late 2021. And you combine that with the loss of third-party tracking, specifically the iOS 14 updates, and how that's implicating things like Facebook ads. Google also following suit, removing third-party tracking, in their search ads. And you add into the fact that digital marketing CPMs are skyrocketing. When I look across some of the ad accounts that I manage, literally 100%, 200% increase in CPM. And so we're going into an era of marketing where the tracking and attribution that allowed us to like sort of overcome the weaknesses in our marketing strategy, it's disappearing. And it's becoming more competitive than ever because companies understand that they have to be on digital. And so all of that put together means that marketers who are reliant on dashboards, who are reliant on their tactics, saw some change happen probably from May to June, July, even August this year, maybe even earlier than that. But in this, like I know this time frame has been difficult for a lot of people. And what do you do? Right? So that's why the strategy is so important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the year-on-year number is a difficult number to look at this year, that's for sure, for any online trader. So yeah, confidence in strategy is one way of combating that particular challenge for sure.
So you've already started talking about, wearing your other hat as an e-commerce strategist for Soltech. So could you give us an example of how mind typing has helped you in developing your strategy and campaigns there?
I think the number one place that you can build a brand today is social. It's because social is not just you broadcasting a message, it's a dialogue, it's a community, it's people engaging with your brand. But it's also one of the most probably difficult places to build a brand because of it, right? Because like you put something out there, people don't like it, they're going to let you know. And the behavior there is also multifaceted. Like they're not buying on the first touch point typically, especially for a higher price point item. So this idea of a linear funnel or like funnel logic is just sort of incredibly flawed, right? Like click funnels is what I'm talking about. So it's like, okay, we've placed the ad. They see the ad. 1,000 people see the ad. 100 people click through. 10 people convert. There's your funnel logic. That tells you as a marketer what you need to do to optimize conversion at each step in order to improve performance of the funnel. What it doesn't tell you is anything about the experience of the person on the other side of the screen. And the experience of the other person on the other side of the screen, reality is like they saw that ad the first time, they scrolled right past it. maybe you put that ad in front of them 5 more times, then they take some action. They remember. They click. They go to the landing page. They read it. They don't take action then. They fall out of your funnel for 2 or 3 months. They have a need. They remember the message. They go to Google. They do a search. They find you. Maybe, your email pop-up, 15% off, abandoned cart trip. And so all in all, it might take like 8, 10, 12 different touch points to drive that conversion. And that is what buying online looks like today. So like when you have behavior that is nonlinear and so multifaceted, you have to understand like what is actually drawing people to purchasing from your brand. And oftentimes like our standard personas don't do a good job of this, because our standard personas tell us like who our customer is, and that's relevant for targeting, but it doesn't really dig into their deeper psychological motivation. So I think part of the reason why marketers are more tactically focused, less strategically focused, is like our standard conception of what a marketing strategy should be has not evolved. It's not as up to date to what would be the most relevant to actually building winning campaigns. And so, one thing that helped us is really, really drilling down into personas in a quantitative way that did not just concern who the person was, but how they think. Because when you're in the realm of who and like who this person is, you're being personalized. You're not necessarily being relevant. And relevancy is the key, not personalization. So this question of relevance really begins with the different mindsets, patterns, mind types, whatever you want to call it, that people fall into that are specific to your product or service. Let's say these patterns that people fall into that are product specific, the most important ones, maybe let's say there are like 3, 4, or 5 of them. Understanding these patterns, and then that's one part of the battle. That's the first 50%. What are these patterns, right? What patterns do people fall into that are product specific, that are relevant to driving the conversion? That's what a persona should be, right? That's 50% of the battle. The other 50% is getting the right message to the right person at the right time. And maybe that's 60%, something like that. Because if you fall into pattern A, which is, I just don't know, I'm uneducated, I don't know what I don't know, versus I have like a lot of fear about my family and what to do in that scenario, and I'm mixing messages, then I'm, at the end of the day, we're not separating signal from noise. So I think, so the first important thing is getting the right, understanding what the patterns are. And the second is figuring out how to deliver that message contextually. And that's where I think some of the advances in MarTech with like behavioral targeting and stuff like that can be really useful, because based on the behavior of the user on your website, you can start to learn more about their intentions, or based on the keyword searches that they're making, you can learn more about the patterns that they're falling into, if you know what those patterns are. And then it's a question of how do you map those together for an effective marketing mix. I'd say that is the most important component of how we cobble together like our e-commerce infrastructure at one of the companies I advise. Even though we're basically a very lean crew, and off of that sort of core idea, we were able to grow that business from 300,000 annual recurring revenue in 2019 to about anticipated 5 million by the end of 2021. All bootstrap,
Wow.
No outside investment, just basically scaling the business based on revenue coming in, taking out small loans, things like that.
It's phenomenal success.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. That's been like really fascinating stuff, Charles. But unfortunately, we are out of time. So I'd like to wrap up with a takeaway question at the very end that we like to ask all of our guests. So if there's something that our listeners can come away with that can be implemented today to help them accelerate their online businesses, what is that one thing?
So I would to just go really high level. All marketing starts with a fundamental understanding of the customer. That's it. If you understand who your customers are, what they care about, and you integrate that into the core of your marketing execution, and you give it time, the results will follow. The problem I think most people have is they never get to that point where they feel confident. And the entirety of their marketing execution is sort of indirectly a way of trying to answer that question, but they're looking at it from the wrong basis. They're looking at it from the basis of like, are my marketing KPIs improving? Did my conversion rate go from like 2.1 to 2.3%? We see a lift in conversion. And these numbers are useful barometers to try and get to the core of the issue, but they are not the issue itself. And so regardless of the methods that you're using, surveys, focus groups, our research methodology, A/B testing, what have you, you need to get to a point where you feel really confident and situated in that issue. And once you get there, that's the foundation. And after you have that foundation, all of what you like, all this MarTech, this AI, sentiment analysis, trend analysis, personalization software, that's really where these tools can start having impact in providing lift. But a lack of fundamentals can never be compensated for through technology, through machine learning, through ad tracking or targeting. It just doesn't work that way. It's not just a plug for MindCart AI. MindCart AI is one way of trying to answer that question. I think it's more efficient, 100%, 10%, whatever. But it's not the only way. People do it other ways all the time. But the thing that is consistent across all of those businesses is they have all figured out this question. That's how you get to PMF.
Awesome.
Great advice.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you both for being on the show. Kevin, Charles, it's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
What an amazing new market research technology that blends copywriting, messaging, psychology, and AI all into one. While it's still relatively new, I'm really excited to see where this will go. And if you're interested in connecting with Charles Chy, you can find him on LinkedIn or on the MindCart website, which is mindcart.ai. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have Emma Shermer-Chamir on the show with us. Emma is the founder of Marketing by Emma, a copywriting agency specializing in Amazon listings. We're going to dive into how to ensure the highest number of people convert on your listing and ways to make some less unique products stand out in the crowded marketplace environment. And don't forget, we've got a 14-day trial for Optly's ad spend optimization tool for campaigns across Facebook and Google. Just log on to optly.com and sign up in just a few minutes. Stay safe, and we'll catch you back here next time on Optly Radio.